I do not represent the agenda of the billionaire class or corporate America, and I don't want their money. But I am enormously proud. I am enormously proud, as some of you may have noticed the other day, that we have raised substantial sums of money because 650,000 Americans made contributions averaging $30 apiece. And that 99% of those contributions were $100 or less. In other words, we are running a people's campaign. And while the millionaires and billionaires may have more money than we do, we have something that they don't have. Look around this room. This is what we have. Tonight, we're going to discuss some serious issues, but before I get into them, 2 points that I want to make. I am the only candidate that I know of in recent history who has told the American people a very simple truth, and that is that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, will have enough power to transform America, to deal with the enormous problems facing working families in this country. No president can do it alone. The only way we make the changes that we have to make is when millions of people come together. When we come together and when we make a political revolution. So my request of you tonight is not just to help me win the Massachusetts primary, but it is to help the day after we win the White House. Corporate America, Wall Street, Koch brothers, large You've heard of the Koch brothers. Large campaign donors have enormous power. But if we stand together as a people, if we don't allow them to divide us up as to whether we're white or black or Hispanic or Asian, if we don't allow them to divide us up, if we're gay or straight, if we don't allow them to divide us up, if we're men or women, or if we are born in this country or some other country. If we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish And that is exactly what this campaign is about. The other point that I want to make, it's a political point, and that is one of the great problems and crises we face as a nation, is that millions of people are basically giving up on the political process. In the last election, last November, 63% of the American people did not vote. 80% of young across this country, working people, low-income people, people of color look around and they say, look, I am hurting. I'm working longer hours for lower wages. I can't pay my electric bill, can't put gas in the car. And what are these people in Washington doing for me? Why should I vote? Our job is to give hope to those people, to engage us all in the political struggle. And when we increase, here's the way politics works. When nobody votes, Republicans win. And when large numbers of people come out, when people demand that the United States government start representing all of us and not just a handful of billionaires, when that happens, we win. And that is what this campaign is about. It is reaching out to our friends and our neighbors, reaching out to working class Republicans who continue to vote against their own best interests, bringing people together. And when we do that, and when we significantly increase the voter turnout, it ain't going to be a contest. We're going to win, hands down. Now, one of the fun things about running for president is you attract media. And you can begin to raise issues that the media and many others would prefer not to talk about, prefer to sweep under the rug. And that's what we are going to do in this campaign. Let me start off with an issue that as a nation we must address, and that is the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality we are currently experiencing. In America today, we are living in a country which has more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth, and it is worse today than at any time since 1928. In America today, listen to this, the top 1/10 of 1%, 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. All over our country, in my state of Vermont and here in Massachusetts, all over this country, people are working incredibly long hours. They're working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs, they're working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And yet 58% of all new income created today goes to the top 1%. Today in America, you got one family, the Walton family that owns Walmart. This one family owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. Today in America, listen to this, in the last 2 years alone, 14 of the wealthiest people in this country saw their wealth increase by $156 billion. Increase. That is more wealth than is owned by the bottom 130 million Americans. That is not what the American economy is supposed to be about. As your Senator Elizabeth Warren reminds us, this is a rigged economy. Heads they win, tails you lose. And that is the economy that we are going to change. We are going to create an economy that works for the middle class and not just the 1%. Now, some of you may have had the misfortune of watching the Republican debate a few weeks ago. And I promised that I would do some tweeting, and I watched it hour after hour. And the energy dissipated my body. It was a very painful experience. And what was really quite extraordinary is observing the parallel universe that these folks live in. And in their world, every problem that you can possibly imagine is caused by Barack Obama. If it's raining, if it's too hot, if there's a mosquito in the room, it is all Barack Obama. But we really can't blame them because they suffer from a very serious amnesia problem. It's a serious illness which seems to afflict Republican presidential candidates. And they can't help it, but they just cannot remember the way things were 7 years ago. They are upset that we only create about 150,000 jobs a month, and we should do better. But they forget that when Bush left office under trickle-down economics, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. They seem to have forgotten that when Bush left office, our financial system, and in fact the world's financial system, was literally on the verge of collapse. That amnesia is a wicked disease. Can't remember that either. And despite the fact that these guys pride themselves on being deficit hawks, and they want to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and education, they just very worried about the deficit. They seem to have forgotten that when Bush left office, we ran up the largest deficit in the history of America, $1.4 trillion. Well, during this campaign, we're going to rattle their amnesia and force them to acknowledge reality. But it is important for us to know, and this is a very important point, that while it is true that the economy today is much better than it was 7 years ago, what we also have got to acknowledge is that for 40 years, 40 years, under Republican and Democratic leadership, the great middle class of this country, once the envy of the world, has been disappearing. And that's a fact. And that is what we have got to address. It is not acceptable to me that median family income today is $4,000 less than it was in 1999. It is not acceptable to me that male workers, the man right in the middle of the American economy, is making hundreds of dollars less in inflation accounted for income than he did 42 years ago. It is not acceptable to me that women are making hundreds of dollars a year less in inflation-adjusted income than they did 7 years ago. So that is the truth. And here's the other aspect of that truth. All of you know that we have seen an explosion of technology in recent years, which means that every worker in America, virtually every worker, is more productive than he or she was 20 years ago. Why is it that with all of this increase in productivity, people are forced to work longer hours for lower wages? We are going to answer that question by transforming this economy so that the millionaires and billionaires do not gain all of the new income and all of the new wealth. And when we talk about the economy, it is not just income and wealth inequality or the collapse of the American middle class. It is high unemployment. And let me tell you something that some of you may not know. Every month, the government comes up with a number of statistics regarding unemployment. One of them is the official unemployment, which gets a lot of media attention, which now is at about 5.1%. But there is another statistic that the government comes up with, which is what we call the real unemployment rate, which includes people who are unemployed, people who have given up looking for work, people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. When you add all of that together, real unemployment in America today is 10%. And now let me tell you something which is very, very rarely talked about, but it is an issue of unbelievable consequence. And that is the tragedy in America regarding youth unemployment. A few months ago, I asked some economists to do a study for me. And I said, tell me what the real rate of unemployment is for high school kids, high school graduates between 17 and 20 years of age. And this is what they reported back. If the kids were white, real unemployment and underemployment was 33%. For Hispanic kids, real unemployment was 36%. For African American kids, real unemployment was 51%. Now, I want you to think for a moment what those numbers are about. What it says is that we have turned our backs on an entire generation of young people. What do young people want? They want to stand up on their own 2 feet. They want to get out of the house. They want to earn some income. They want to become independent. They want to begin their life as adults. That's what they want. And what we have said to them, sorry, there are no jobs for you. And let me tell you something which is also of enormous consequence. The United States of America today has, by far, more people in jail than any other country on earth, more than China. We have 2.2 million people in jail, federal, state, local. If anybody in this room thinks there is not a direct correlation between the outrageously high rate of youth unemployment and the fact that we have more people in jail than any other country, you would be mistaken. My view is, and I feel this very, very strongly, that instead of letting kids drop out of high school, instead of having 5.5 million young people in this country without jobs, without going to school, hanging out on street corners, instead of doing that, it makes a lot more sense to me that we invest in jobs and education, not in jails and incarceration. We need to be the country in the world, not which has more people in jail, but which has the best educated population on earth. When we talk about the economy and when we talk about why people are working such incredibly long hours, and when we talk about why there are many, many people throughout this country who, after working 40, 50, 60 hours, end up going to the emergency food shelf in order to get food to feed their kids, there is one reason. And that reason is that wages in America are just too damn low. You can do the arithmetic as well as I can. $7.25 is the federal minimum wage. Multiply that by 40, multiply that by 52 weeks a year, and what you find is a level of income that nobody can survive on. And that is why we have got to recognize that the minimum wage of $7.25 is a starvation wage. That minimum wage has got to be raised to a living wage, $15 an hour over the next few years. It is not a left-wing extremist idea to say that if somebody in this country works 40 hours a week, that that person should not live in poverty. And when we talk about equitable wages and fair wages, I would hope that every man in this room will stand with the women and fight for pay equity for women workers. There is no rational economic reason for women to be making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. That is nothing more than old-fashioned sexism, and that has got to end. And I'll tell you something else, something that I have a hard time understanding. And that is, if we create pay equity for women, if we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, here's what's going to happen. Throughout this country, there are, I don't know how many, I suspect millions of families where women alone are trying to raise their kids. And I got to tell you something. When you talk about heroines and heroes, at the top of that list has got to be the single moms of America. Because I honestly don't know. I don't know how a woman can raise her kids, go to work, and come back and do all of that. And that is why it is absolutely imperative that we support those single moms by making sure that they can provide security for their kids. Now, during this campaign season, you're going to hear a lot from my Republican colleagues about family values. You ever hear that? They just stay up nights worrying about families. That's all they do. But you and I know what they mean when they talk about family values. What they are saying is that the women of this country should not have the right to control their own bodies. I disagree. And this view, by the way, comes from conservatives who tell us that government should not be involved in our lives. Give me a break. And when Republicans talk about family values, what they also are talking about is denying our gay brothers and sisters the right to get married. I disagree. Now, I have 4 kids, and I have 7 grandchildren, and my wife, Jane, and I have been married for 27 years. We believe in family values. Our values are very different than Republican family values. And when we talk about family values, we are talking about ending the international embarrassment of the United States of America being the only major country on earth that does not provide paid family and medical leave. You know, in my view, forcing a woman who has just given birth to a baby to be separated from that baby, that newborn baby, have to go back to work in order to earn enough income to take care of that family, that is not a family value. That's the opposite of a family value. is why together we will fight for 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave for every family in America. You know, when pollsters call you up and they say, well, what's on your mind? What are you mostly concerned about? The answer usually is, almost always is, a four-letter word called J-O-B-S, jobs. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why. If you are 55 years of age, you are scared to death that when you go to work on Monday, your boss may say, Joe, thank you for 30 years of service, but we have to let you go, and we are going to replace you with a worker half your age at half your salary. That happens every day. And if you are a college graduate, you are having a hard time finding a job commensurate with your education. And if you are a high school graduate or a high school dropout, you are finding it hard to get a job at any wage. That's the truth. Given that reality, that real unemployment is 10%, that youth unemployment is 30, 40, 50%, it is clear to me that we need a major jobs program putting millions of our people back to work. In my view, we should be hiring teachers, not firing teachers. With a child care and pre-K system that is largely dysfunctional and unaffordable, we need to be hiring people at good pay to take care of our young children. And when we have an infrastructure, our roads, bridges, levees, dams, airports, rail, water systems, wastewater plants that are in desperate need of repair, we should be creating millions of jobs rebuilding that infrastructure. But the issue is not just creating new jobs, it is preventing the loss of millions of jobs because of disastrous trade policies. You are looking at a former congressman and a senator who voted against NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China. And I will do my best to help defeat this disastrous TPP agreement. Our current trade policies were written by corporate America. Their goal was to shut down plants in this country. Since 2001, we have lost 60,000 factories, millions of decent paying jobs. Corporate America has got to start investing in this country, not just China and other countries. And when we talk about creating an economy that works for working families, we are going to have to take a real hard look at the greed and recklessness and illegal behavior on Wall Street. We We need a financial system which is prepared to make affordable loans to small and medium-sized businesses so we create jobs in this country. We do not need a Wall Street financial system which is an island unto itself, only concerned about making huge profits for themselves. Some of you remember that back in 2008, against my vote, Congress bailed out Wall Street. And they were bailed out because they were, quote unquote, too big to fail. Well, you might be surprised to know that 3 out of the 4 largest banks in this country today are bigger now than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. In my view, if a bank is too big to fail, it is too big to exist. Let's break them up. I am often asked, which is the most important issue that you deal with? And I can never answer that because all of these issues are enormously important. But I can point to one issue which impacts all of the other issues. And that is, as you all know, some 5 years ago, by a 5-4 decision, the United States Supreme Court in the Citizens United case what they said to the wealthiest people in this country, they said, well, you already own much of our economy. We are now going to give you the opportunity to buy the United States government, and that is precisely what they are trying to do right now. Now, I hope all of you know this, and I'm using my words advisedly and carefully, that today the American political system has been totally corrupted and the foundations of American democracy are being undermined. Let me repeat to you what I have said previously, and that is that no nominee of mine will get that nomination unless he or she is prepared when they get on the Supreme Court to, as soon as possible, vote to overturn Citizens United. I am a passionate believer in democracy. And I will be damned if the billionaire class and the Supreme Court are going to take democracy away from us. I want to see this country have the most vibrant democracy in the world. My Republican colleagues in states around this country are working as hard as they can to suppress the vote, to deny, to make, that's right. They are political cowards who are afraid if people participate in the political system. So they are working as hard as they can to make it harder for people of color to vote, for older people to vote, even for young people to vote. And what I say to them, if you don't have the guts to defend your ideas in a free election, get another job.